Hello and welcome back to another fantasy football video. Hope you're all doing well. Now this weekend was a weekend for monstrous FPL scores. It was a weekend where some fantasy football managers managed to get themselves into triple figures. I myself managed to get 91 points. Almost there. Almost where there with some of the big hitters like Haaland performing extremely well. We also had quite a few differential picks that performed pretty well as well. And those are going to be the sort of main focus of this video today. Looking ahead to game week 10 to those players who we can bring into our fantasy football teams. If you're new around here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really does help me out. Hit the like button if you enjoy, and let's get straight on into this one. Now, the midfielders out of all of the positions were the players that performed particularly well this weekend. And I feel like one of the standout players was Leandro Trossard for Brighton. Playing against Liverpool, they really exposed weakness down that right-hand side, particularly targeting Trent. Now, Trossard has got back-to-back hauls, albeit that he missed out 2 game weeks 7 and 8 in between. So fair play to you if you have managed to pick up both of his double-point hauls. It is a bit of a conundrum with Trossard. It's one of the classic form over fixtures. Brighton play Spurs, Brentford, Forest and Manchester City. So not the best set of fixtures. Over the next 3 though, he could be targeted with 2 of those games being at home. Now, Gabriel Martinelli is currently considered to be the best option in that kind of 6 to 7 million bracket. With Trossard performing so well this weekend, he really is giving Martinelli a bit of a run for his money, especially now that we know that Arsenal do blank in game week 12, and that is when Brighton do play at Nottingham Forest. Almiron scored a brace against Fulham and could have got a third if he wasn't marginally offside. He's only 1 goal behind his previous Premier League top scoring tally, which is 4 goals, so he's now on 3 goals so far this season. Generally, he's looking like he's playing with a lot more confidence, and that is shown in his attacking output. Coming in at 5.1 million, he could provide a really nice budget option, and I think he could genuinely be the player that a lot of FPL managers, including myself, thought that Bailly was going to be at the start of the season. Bowen finally managed to get himself off the mark, scoring a goal and getting what was quite a lucky assist, to be honest, a kind of shot which deflected back to Scamacca, and Scamacca absolutely rifled it into the back of the net. Now, with that being said, Bowen managed to clean up the bonus points and now has a favourable run of fixtures up until the World Cup. Now, it really is just a question of which of these 8 million midfielders do we go for. Not the classic 8 million midfielders that plenty of people were going for at the start of the season. The likes of Diaz, Saka and Kulusevski seemingly being sacked off, and these guys are taking over. Now, what a game the Manchester derby was. It was a treat to watch, a 9-goal thriller, and Foden managing to pick himself up a hat-trick in that game. He started each of Manchester City's games so far this season, and is providing quite a good alternative to Kevin De Bruyne, matching his points thus far this season, and 4 million cheaper could be a nice way into that Manchester City attack going forward. Now, we do have to consider game week 12 because that is when Manchester City do blank, but I do think that in between then, Foden can score enough points for you to justify bringing him in, even if it's only for 2 game weeks. After that as well, Manchester City do have nice fixtures, and I am expecting Foden to be in my team in the near future. Out of the 3 though, I do think that James Maddison is the best option, scoring 2 goals and grabbing himself an assist against Forest, managing to get 18 points after he did pick up a little yellow card as well. But plenty of managers, including myself, aren't too disappointed with that, because an 18-pointer is absolutely massive in terms of your overall rank. Maddison has managed to pick himself up 8 goal returns so far this season in the 8 games that Leicester have played, and generally just looking like he's playing with a lot of confidence and continuing on from the form that he had towards the back end of last season. Out of these midfield option, I probably would say that Maddison is my top pick, with Almiron being the kind of budget option as well. Trossard one to look out for. Next, we move on into the attackers. Now, the attackers this week, obviously apart from Haaland, weren't all that impressive. I've got Skamaka here as a standout option, mainly because that Mitrovic at the minute is injured, and he provides, I think for me, a very good alternative pick. He had a nice little international break with Italy, scoring a couple of goals with them, and has come back and started for West Ham in place of Antonio. A little bit of a surprise there, but managed to come on and score an absolute thunderbolt into the back of the net, just outside the box volley. I mean, it was a very, very tidy finish indeed. Doesn't have the best expected goal returns, and it is yet to be seen whether he will be getting consistent minutes with Antonio being benched, as I say. But with the fixtures that West Ham do have, I think that if we get news that Mitrovic has been injured, he could definitely be a decent replacement. Firmino hauling yet again after coming under much criticism from many pundits about not being kind of the player that he has been in previous years. He's really staking his claim to be that number one centre forward for Liverpool with an expected goal return of 1.14. He's really up there with the big hitters, having an better expected goal return than Mohamed Salah so far this season. Obviously, like Skamaka, the main thing that we have to consider with Firmino is, does he get rotated? Even after very good performances, they're not going to be benching Darwin Núñez every week after spending that amount of money on him. But at 8 million, I do think that he is one to look out for. Then we go on to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and at 9 million, he is quite an awkward price. He scored a tidy little finish against Crystal Palace, letting the ball come over his shoulder and then half volleying it into the bottom corner. He's starting to show flashes of the player that he was at Arsenal. I will say though that for the majority of that Crystal Palace game, I wasn't too impressed with him. He was dropping very deep and picking the ball up from defenders and then passing it back to them. It's not really the position that you want your attackers to be in, let alone your striker. And so Aubameyang for me will have to do a little bit more over the coming game weeks for me to justify putting him in to my team. However, with Wolves in game week 10, if you really fancy a punt, he could be an okay option to go for. Then we've got Odsonne Edouard of Crystal Palace coming in at 5.3 million. I think that he is actually quite viable. I think that as a Mitrovic replacement as well, dropping down by about 1.6 million, it could allow you to do a lot more with the rest of your team. Now, Edouard is a player that isn't guaranteed minutes. Him and Mateta in Crystal Palace tend to rotate quite a bit. I do think though that after scoring he will be starting against Leeds, and if you can afford to play him against Leeds and have a little bit of that rotational capacity where you don't necessarily play him for game week 11. Andreas, a player that rotates quite well with him in that respect, playing at home to Bournemouth. I think that Edouard could be a decent one game week punt against Leeds at home. I'm actually backing him to score and very much looking towards bringing him in my team. Finally, I thought I'd highlight Jamie Vardy of Leicester City. Now, although he didn't score against Nottingham Forest, he managed to pick himself up an assist and he was starting to look very dangerous. He does have a bit of competition in that attack from Patson Daka. However, I think when fit, Jamie Vardy does have that number one spot. He is a player that has constantly defied his expected goal return, so I wouldn't look into those too much because we know that Jamie Vardy can score from pretty much any angle, pretty much any position. So I think that going forward, Vardy is one to look out for, and it would be quite nice, if we could bring Jamie Vardy back into our teams, potentially for one last hurrah, as it doesn't seem like he's going to be playing for too much longer. Finally, looking into the defense, Trippier yet again was the standout man. Getting pretty lucky, I would say that he managed to lock himself a clean sheet in just before Fulham managed to score an 89th minute goal, and Trippier even managed to pick himself up a bonus point for his troubles. He's looking good for bonus points. He's looking good for potential attacking returns from free kicks and set pieces. Newcastle have a decent set of fixtures going forward. I think he's pretty much a shoo-in. He's already gone up 0.5 million in price, and so if you don't own him, I think that he is a good option and you should really be getting him into your team. The rest of the different defensive picks are quite differential. Now, I didn't think I was going to be bringing in a Bournemouth defender. at all this season, let alone this soon. But since Scott Parker has departed, they've really shored up at the back, and that has been partly due to this man, Senesi. He comes in at 4.5 million. As you can see, there are plenty of other options at this price. However, I do think that Bournemouth for the rest of this season, every game they play is going to be extremely cagey. I can see them having a lot of 0-0s, a lot of 1-0s either way. I think they're going to be a team that keep every single game very tight. And Senesi, as we saw at the weekend against Brentford, managed to pick himself up 3 bonus points. Bournemouth have an okay set of fixtures going forward with a couple of home games, and he is one that I do genuinely have my eye on. Then we look at Tyrone Mings of Aston Villa coming at 4.3 million. I do think that he could be an absolute bargain. Aston Villa managing to keep 2 clean sheets in the last 2 games, when clean sheets have been especially hard to come by this season. Mings getting himself back into that Aston Villa teams. And I think it's quite showing how good of a potential bargain that Mings is, considering that in previous seasons he's been priced at 5 million and maintained that price throughout the season. He obviously does love a yellow card and a potential red card as well, but also is good for the bonus points. And with Villa actually starting to keep clean sheets and looking pretty good in terms of expected goals conceded against them, in terms of, you know, they're not expected to concede too many goals, I think that Mings could be quite viable. Then we move on to Castagna of Leicester. Now, Leicester managing to pick up their first clean sheet of this season against Nottingham Forest. I still don't think that Leicester are defensively that great of an outfit. They just played against a side who couldn't really finish their dinner. They still allowed at Nottingham Forest plenty of good opportunities. With that being said, though, Castagna had a very good game, managing to pick himself up 2 bonus points in a game where his only contribution was a clean sheet in a 4-0 victory. I think that is really telling to sort of how good he played in that game. Going forward, as mentioned with Maddison, Leicester do have a nice set of fixtures. So if you're going to go for a differential punt, that Castagna could be your guy. As we've seen in seasons gone by, he's also good for an attacking return every now and again as well. Finally, I've gone for Fofana from Chelsea. Now, although they didn't keep a clean sheet against Crystal Palace at the weekend and have been particularly poor at keeping clean sheets so far this season, especially from a side that we are sort of gotten used to them being pretty solid defensively. At 4.4 million, it looks like he's going to be playing week in, week out, playing against Wolves, a side that have struggled to score goals this season. And as I say, against Crystal Palace, they didn't really look like they were going to concede. A very nice finish by Edouard. Other than that, Crystal Palace didn't really threaten Chelsea too much, and they were in control. Chelsea were for large periods of the game. I say they didn't really manage to threaten them, but to be fair, they should have had a man sent off, and that probably would have changed the game. But overall, I think that Chelsea look like they're going to be decent defensively under Graham Potter. And, you know, 4.4 million is a very cheap way into that defence. I think overall, if I was looking at a player for Game Week 10, Fofana probably would be the guy I would go for. I think out of these guys here, probably has the highest potential of keeping a clean sheet. That is, if you don't have a Trippier. I think Trippier is my standout #1 option. If you don't have, then for this coming game week, I would be looking at Fofana. So that is my watch list ahead of Game Week 10. Quite a few differential picks in there. Do let me know down in the comments the potential players that you're thinking of bringing into your teams. If you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe if you are new around here. It really does help me out. And I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.